Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you to do it too. And as a reminder, on this program, when we say go green, we're not talking about merely environmentalism. We're talking about something different, deep ecology, the interconnectedness of all life. And whether you come at that from a hard science perspective, or you take the eco spiritual feminist perspective, or like me, you say those are both completely valid ways of understanding the world, let's be clear, candid, and courageous. We are destroying Mother Earth faster than she can replenish herself. And this whatever we do to that web of life, we're ultimately doing to ourselves. And right about now, we're in a gut check moment about the need to do things differently. And with that, I am going to bring our good friend Shane Knight into the conversation. Shane, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing all right, David. Good to see you.
And of course, let's just be tell the audience right up front. This is for the first time here on Redneck Gone Green. We doing a pre-recording, right? So
That's right.
this is not a live show. So, folks, if you are watching, and we hope you are, we're not going to be able to take your comments and intersperse them throughout the course of the show as we normally do. However, we will ask you, as always, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, because we need to bust through this corporate algorithm so that we can have this real talk with each other, because ain't nobody coming to save us, Shane. It's up to us.
I know it. And as scary as that sounds, I'm actually starting to feel a lot more comfortable with that as a concept because of the things that different groups and organizations around this country and around the world are actually doing, the systems that they're putting in place to make sure that we can continue life in some form. Won't be the same, but I'm still feeling pretty good about it.
Well, I appreciate you being so candid, Shane, because one of the things that I tell people in their 20s and 30s, that they are not going to live in the world that I grew up in. Uh,
Mm-mm.
but there is still, I believe, a chance to make some significant transitions. And I'm excited about the fact that here on Redneck Gone Green, we have the privilege and the opportunity to bring people to conversations week by week with unfiltered conversation. This is not corporate media. This is not we're selling to advertisers. This is real talk with real people who are experimenting with what might be done. And I also want to point out, Shane, that something kind of exciting is going to happen for you and me this weekend, May 2 through 5. Isn't that true?
That's right. Well, by the time people are watching this, we will have already, for the first time, met in person, which I, for one, am very much looking forward to this weekend in Atlanta. It's overdue, and I'm also looking forward to meeting everyone else. A lot of the people that we've had on the show so far are going to be there as well for the Build and Resist conference, and I'm pretty stoked. I'm pretty stoked.
I am too. And the conference, y'all, is called Resist and Build.
Oh
And
yeah, I got that
one of
wrong.
the, all good, one of the co-conveners of that process, uh, frequent visitors, watchers, listeners to Redneck Gone Green will recognize the name Emily Kawano. Emily Kawano is an economist by education, but a community organizer by practice. She's the co-founder of the Wellspring Cooperative in Western Massachusetts. She's the co-founder of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network. She and I work together on the People's Network for Land and Liberation. And most importantly for me, she's one of my good friends, Emily Kawano. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back. Good to
So
see y'all.
looky here, Emily. This is really exciting because you and I have been working together for a minute now, and I'm going to actually take a step back. And as I like to do sometimes, I do believe in trying to remind myself that I don't know what I don't know. Even right now, I don't know what I don't know, and you, dear viewer or listener, don't know what you don't know either. That kind of humility is really important as we go about the serious work of social change. And that whole setup is to say that when you and I first met was Atlanta, Georgia, 2007. as part of the U.S. Social Forum. And I'm wondering if you could just say a word or two about what the U.S. Social Forum is and what you were doing there in that first historic meeting of the Social Forum process.
Sure. So the U.S. Social Forum in 2007 was the first edition of the World Social Forum in the United States. So the Social Forum, World Social Forum, local social forums, thematic social forums are gatherings of people and organizations and movements that are working for a better world. And it's a convening, and it's a place where there's this, collision, these connections, and many things come out of that, even though the social forums themselves are somewhat prohibited from running a campaign, partly just to prevent that kind of turfy warfare that can go on. But it's a place where organizations, movements can come together. And the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network grew out of that meeting at the Social Forum. So I was at the time the director of the Center for Popular Economics, and we sort of initiated very early on, put together a team to organize a track of workshops on solidarity economy. We also had some meetings, and out of that was born the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network. So 2007, and that's where I met David.
That is where we met. And I also want to say, so Emily, as an economist, she was at the Center for Popular Economics, which, by the way, does some of this, I think, genuinely the single best popular education around breaking down what the economy is and teaching economics. I still remember the first time I saw you do surplus value with rice, popcorn. You did it with popcorn, with kernels of popcorn. It's brilliant. And folks, look it up. I got to tell you, I had this aha moment whenever she did that. But I also want to say, I too was, of course, at the 2007 U.S. Social Forum. And I'll admit that I came in like still a little bit like, what do you mean it's a process? It's not an organization. It's not even merely an event. So there was this real impetus on this is bringing together social change agents, but the organization of it is not held by one entity or organization. The key anchors, they called them, that were coming together were responsible for the whole thing. So it was a really pretty sprawling thing. And what were we, 25,000 or so in Atlanta over the course of that 5 days. But y'all, here's what I want to admit. I put together another track with some of my longtime friends and comrades, the radical democracy track. And, I'm very proud of what we put together there. I did go to some of the events that Emily and others had put together, and I came away from it thinking, oh, that's just co-ops. I'm a serious revolutionary. That solidarity economy stuff is not for me. And of course, I'm saying that as now somebody who's drank the Kool-Aid. Emily Kawano and I are the co-coordinators of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network, because when I first bumped into it, Emily, it felt to me like this is nothing but co-ops. Like we're not going to be able to really, have the revolutionary transformation that I thought. And you saw something, and your colleagues saw something about the solidarity economy earlier than I did. So I just want to acknowledge that I do believe that there is a approach to solidarity economy where you can do very concrete things, but with a vision that is explicitly post-capitalist or anti-capitalist. Can you talk a little bit about how the process went from convening some folks to actually forming this network, and why?
Yeah, first I do want to say, I think that perception of solidarity economy equals co-ops persists. I think there is still that perception with some people, and it's partly because cooperative businesses and other forms of cooperative consumer co-ops, financial co-ops, etc. Electrical co-ops, credit unions are pretty high profile and are very important, right? This is kind of the bread and butter of making and producing goods and services, right? And wanting them to be democratically owned by their members is really important to solidarity economy. But absolutely, you're right. Solidarity economy is way more than just co-ops, and it's the whole shebang, right? It's looking to move beyond capitalism, because those of us who are working within a solidarity economy framework are really clear and very convinced that we're not going to get to that better, more sustainable, more democratic, more equitable world by reforming capitalism. If that's your view, fine, that's a view, right? But solidarity economy is not your home. We're just very clear that we need to move beyond capitalism. And so solidarity economy really provides a framework to knit together, to connect up all these different pieces of solidarity economy. And no matter where you are, you could be doing co-ops, you could be doing mutual aid, you could be doing local currencies, you could be doing, public banking, whatever piece you're working on, that's great, right? But to see your specific sphere of work as being connected up with other elements of solidarity economy to really build a different system that's operating on a different logic than the individualistic and competitive logic of capitalism. That's what solidarity economy is about.
And Emily, I love how you've sort of laid that out. And one of the things that did take a while for me to see, but now that I have, it's a lens that I look through constantly, and that is solidarity economy is an explicitly post-capitalist framework. And one of the core values of or principles of the solidarity economy framework is pluralism. The idea that there is not one right way to do it. And so some people then will take that to say, well, okay, then reforming capitalism can be like, you could just make reforming capitalism in the solidarity economy framework, which is not exactly accurate. It is instead to say, no, we work with people who believe that you can reform capitalism. We're not dogmatic at all, but we do have what I would call an ideological commitment to a post-capitalist framework. We want to ensure that we no longer put profit über alles. We no longer have this private ownership of the means of production as the only way that you can do an economy framework. And so to me, I think it's really valuable to take a moment to lift up. We are absolutely non-dogmatic about how to get there, and we'll work with you even if you think that capitalism can be reformed. But those of us who self-identify as solidarity economy practitioners, organizers, are committed that ultimately we want to replace capitalism, not merely coexist with it. Is that a fair way to say it?
That is absolutely a fair and a very beautiful way to put it. Absolutely. Yeah. And we could get into why, right? There are some fundamental sort of laws of motion of capitalism and the logic that it's based on that underpin that analysis of why we will not be able to achieve sustainability. We will not be able to achieve equity. We will not be able to, achieve harmony with each other and Mother Earth within a capitalist system. No matter how you reform it, you can make it kinder and gentler. We've seen that. We had a period, Keynesianism or, the up until we had neoliberalism, it was a bit kinder and more and gentler, right? And there was a stronger social safety net. But what happens inevitably is that gets dismantled because the basic fundamental law or logic of capitalism is going to always be trying to undo the shackles that tame it and make it more humane. That's why we believe that.
Well, isn't that just greed? Isn't it greed
You
that
know what?
drives the
So
capitalistic
here's
machine?
what a great question. That is really, really a great question. And when we, at Center for Popular Economics, when we would talk about capitalism, we would actually push back against it. It's about greed, but it's the system. It's the way the system is set up, which is not to deny that there are very, very greedy people and that greed is a temptation for human beings, right? We
Greed is an
don't want to
addiction.
we don't want to be Pollyanna-ish about this and say, oh no, we can all just be angels. No, human
No.
beings are, we're a mix, right? But the system will encourage certain kinds of behaviors, and the culture that supports capitalism encourages that greed. And in fact, the whole logic of capitalism is built on this assumption that we are self-interested and calculating, and that the whole analysis around the invisible hand is that we will achieve the best possible outcome by everybody pursuing their own self-interest, right? That's the basic model. And I just think that is such a flawed assumption about human nature, that we're basically greedy and abstracting from our better angels, right? The side that is empathetic and compassionate, solidaristic, cooperative, loving, right? It abstracts from all of that. So at the heart of it, capitalism, the model of capitalism and the assumption of who we are as human beings is just flawed. And from there, we have a system that is likewise flawed, inevitably, inherently, intrinsically. That's my view. So
And,
there's no reforming it.
so I love this, and I love your question, Shane, because I want to underscore my agreement with Emily Kawano, co-coordinator of the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network. Greed is absolutely present, but it is not all that we are.
No.
And I still remember, Emily, like introduction to macroeconomics being introduced to this concept of Homo economicus. And I know as somebody who teaches economics and breaks it down without dumbing it down, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about Homo economicus versus the other approach that I've learned from you called Homo solidaricus, and sort of compare and contrast those two, because I've always loved it whenever I hear you talk about that. So I'm going to invite you to share with viewers, listeners of Redneck Gone Green, what are those two concepts about?
Right. Yeah. So Homo economicus is literally economic man. And economic man, Homo economicus, is the central character in this story, right? Economics is really a story, right? It's a socially created system, right? And it's based on some assumptions about who we are. And Homo economicus, economic man, is rational, calculating, self-interested, competitive, right? And then economic theory builds on that, right? That assumption of who we are and what human nature is. So if you start there, and then you're assuming that people are competing to maximize profits, the assumption is everybody doing that is going to lead to greater efficiency, innovation. The bad apples, right? Anybody who's behaving dishonestly or cheating or trying to kill all the competitors by undercutting their price, like those bad actors will get weeded out in the competitive process, and that people are rewarded for kind of being good capitalists, right? We've seen that clearly isn't true. It clearly isn't true. Bad actors often do win out. They capture greater and greater market share and greater power and influence and greater economic advantages through economies of scale, right? Being able to buy, for example, source in bulk, for example. And capitalism just does not work the way it's sort of premised to work based on, going back to Adam Smith's invisible hand. And I know David is probably one to jump in here with talking a bit about Adam Smith and how he was a moral philosopher. David, do you want to jump in here?
Thank you so much. Emily knows me so well, and I know her so well. I'm like, tell this story, Emily. And she says, oh, you tell that story. So it goes like this. Adam Smith is lifted up, especially by libertarian types, as almost this demagogue, this demigod, this like unassailable moral philosopher about how, and they use it to justify capitalism. And this is the paraphrase, y'all. But it's pretty darn close. Adam Smith famously said, "Never does the merchant class gather, even for mirth and merriment, but that the topic of conversation becomes a conspiracy against the working class." Now, that sounds like Karl Marx, right? But of course, it's not. That's literally Adam Smith. The point is that Adam Smith talked about, yes, Adam Smith did believe in markets and market economy. We can talk about whether or not we think in the world that I want to live in, whether markets are actually necessary, but they certainly have existed throughout all of human history. Some mechanism by which to exchange goods and services, etc. Right? But the point is that Adam Smith talked about the need for governmental not interference, but governments create markets, that governmental regulation is absolutely critical and necessary to avoid monopoly. Adam Smith, in fact, said without strong regulation of the market, that there will be monopolies that destroy the invisible hand of the market itself. And to me, that's always been something that, frankly, folks who claim to be adherents of capitalism just do not come to terms with or come to grips with.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. And so, in contrast, Homo solidarus is looking at human nature as in a much more holistic way. Yes, we are calculating and rational and self-interested, no doubt, right? Who would want to deny that? But we are also all those other things that I already mentioned. We are compassionate. We are altruistic. We are solidaristic. We are cooperative. And I would argue human beings, given that we are not mighty creatures, right? We don't have a hard armor. We don't have sharp teeth and claws. We're not a predator class, right? Human beings would not have survived if we did not cooperate, right? That is how humans as a species have survived. And many, right? We know now that it is just not true that nature is red in tooth and claw, right? That is a one-dimensional view. Some parts of nature are like that, but many parts of nature are cooperative, symbiotic, and depend on each other. And in terms of the entire ecosystem of Mother Earth, it's all based on this relationship between the web of life and existence. And so that's what Homo solidarus draws on, that we are both, yes, that the devil and the angel, or our higher nature is part of what we need to factor in when we're thinking about how to build a society, a world, an economy that really brings out the best in us, takes care of Mother Earth, and does it in a way that will look different in different places and different cultures and in different times. Right? It'll change it over time.
The way I look at it, Emily, is... Oh, go ahead, Shane.
Yeah, no, I wanted to jump in because one of the things that keeps rolling through my head, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, Emily, about the concept of survival. You're right in saying that human beings would not have survived had we not collaborated and worked as organized groups. But I look at it as two separate ways of survival: the mechanism of what feeds capitalism, but also what will save us, the devil or the angel, right? Because when you look at the current family structure that we all know, the global family structure instead of being raised as tribal beings. There's a method of survival that we learn that is selfish. We have to be selfish in our earliest age, and the way that the family is structured to survive as infants under the family structure. And then the two going hand in hand together, the family structure with capitalism mixed with all of the other ways in which our society is formed different structures where people really do, you're almost forced, right, to be a selfish individual for survival's sake. And that's one of the things that I'm loving about the difference, you know, the Solidarity Economy Network and the other organizations that the framework that is being built, making it clear to people about the instance of survival and where we're actually at in today's world, the importance of coming together. Because at the end of the day, that's the only way we're going to survive. Again, the monster that we're against is capitalism. And I'm grateful that, especially what I've seen, like the younger generations picking up with the concept of capitalism and how it really is our enemy, and how willing people are to start laying down their differences and coming together and realizing what actually matters when it comes to community and taking care of one another. I wanted to ask, because a lot of people that I speak with about the concept of capitalism, a lot of people seem to have the idea that there's just going to be this magical transformation. We're going to go from, oh, we live in this horrible fucking world with capitalism at the helm, and then we're going to wake up tomorrow and then poof, we're just going to have something else. And they don't think about the process and the work that goes into it. And the why we're doing the work, why you do the work, why David's been doing the work for so long. Can we talk about the actual process, what it could look like, and why we're doing the things that we're doing, have the pieces in place so that when capitalism finally collapses, there's something else there, or at least the transitional phase.
Yeah. I would argue that, so it's so interesting that you talk about how capitalism really kind of forces people to behave in a particular way, individualistic, self-interested, competitive. I agree. That's true. At the same time, what you've seen throughout human history and throughout the 200 plus years that capitalism has really been around, you see a persistence of the other stuff, the solidaristic, the cooperative, the altruistic, the reciprocal, the loving side of human beings, right? You see it in our communities, you see it in families, you see it in how people come together in troubled times and in emergencies, right? Capitalism cannot expunge that from human nature, right? That persists despite this system that feeds the more self-interested sides of us. So I want to say that is a through line, and that's really important, because what goes along with that is that the solidarity economy has existed for as long as human beings have been around, right? They don't call it that, right? But cooperative ways of living together, producing goods and services together, exchanging, has existed forever, right? And that builds right up until the present. There's this huge foundation, right? It's not like we suddenly discovered, solidarity economy, let's start building these more democratic, equitable, sustainable, cooperative initiatives, right? These initiatives, there's a through line. I'm a second generation cooperator. My father managed a cooperative grocery store in Pennsylvania. He worked on an organic farm in his day. So there's a through line. You go back through history, and a lot of the things that we're talking about, they have different names, slightly different forms, but these things many of them are old and ancient, right? So I just want to give us a little maybe shot in the arm. We're not creating things from scratch. Hopefully we're honoring these long traditions of every single culture has had these practices that solidarity economy would completely embrace. I mean, one example is just care work, right? the unpaid care work that we all engage in, right? At some point with our kids, with our parents, with our siblings, our neighbors. We all engage in care work. And solidarity economy would embrace that as a very, very, very important, critical piece of economic activity. We would just all be dead. Really, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that care work. So there's a huge foundation to build on. And we're trying to seize this moment where multiple crises are converging, and the belief in the status quo and capitalism has been shaken, and to try to push through to grow something different. Yeah.
And Shane, I deeply appreciate you sort of pushing to talk about, yeah, but the how is it done? Like, what is that transitional program? And I'm going to set you up, Emily, because I think about that seminal essay that you wrote on the solidarity economy. And there's a phrase that you've used that I just adore, and it is most left activity is theory in search of a practice. And you articulated that solidarity economy is practice in search of a theory. In other words, these things are already happening, and they're happening, but they're not happening in what I would think of as a self-aware, coherent, self-replicating kind of way, right? They're just what we're doing, the care work that you've described. And my setup for you in that essay, you talk about the typology of solidarity economy practices that are already happening according to economic factors. And for the economists to talk about production, and then distribution and exchange, and then consumption, and then finance, and then governance. And then you lay out how there are already examples of post-capitalist or non-capitalist ways of doing production itself that are already happening now, but they haven't yet knitted together into a self-reliant or self-aware movement. I don't think I'm being very elegant here, but that's how we're on the verge, but we're not quite there yet.
Exactly. So all those examples, or I refer to them as solidarity economy practices. So in production, you have co-ops, you have DIY, do it yourself or do it together. You have all kinds of production. You have all kinds of examples in consumption, right? In all these spheres, there's lots and lots of examples. And as I said, some of them are old and have been around a long time and are very successful. But right now they're atomized, right? And I am going to tell the story about the imaginal cells again. So forgive me if you've already heard this, but I think it's so apt. When a caterpillar spins its chrysalis, its body starts to break down into this nutrient-rich group. And within that group are these things called imaginal cells. And those imaginal cells have a different vision of what it could be. And it's such a foreign vision that what's left of the caterpillar's immune system starts attacking those imaginal cells, starts to kill them. But some of those imaginal cells survive and they find each other. They start clumping together. And as they continue to grow stronger, come together, they're able to not only survive, but they're also able to specialize, right? So some become an eye, and some become a wing, and some become a leg, and some become the head, until it emerges as this completely different creature called a butterfly. And the reason why I like this metaphor for the solidarity economy is we're at that stage of there are, a million imaginal cells, and they haven't yet recognized each other as holding the same vision of giving birth to a whole new creature, a whole new system, and haven't come together. I actually think some of that recognition of a common sense of purpose is growing. I think making the connections is where we're at, right? Like really building those concrete connections between the finance and the consumption and the production and the distribution and exchange, right? And then tying that in with governance, right, which kind of puts the guardrails and provides the structure, the institutions and the policies that all of this operates within. So you need all those pieces to come together. Solidarity economy provides a framework or a skeleton to kind of connect it all up. But that's where we are, I feel, right now, is really trying to connect these different practices up so that it articulates, it visibilizes, and puts in practice this coherent system.
And Shane, you and I here on Redneck Gone Green have been bringing forth some folks who are doing some of these practices. Of course, Rick Wolf at Democracy at Work has been doing that for a long time as well. But I want to really lay out, for example, some of the very concrete things for our viewers and listeners to think about. How many of these are you already aware of? Deeper still, how many are you actually participating in? Because there are ways to do it. Worker-owned cooperatives, volunteer collectives, community gardens, unpaid care work, which Emily mentioned earlier. But there are also ways of distribution and exchange, fair trade networks, community-supported agriculture programs, local currencies and time banks, bartering or free cycle services. So all sorts of ways in an explicitly non-capitalist way are things being both produced and distributed. But wait, there's more, because there are also already in existence consumer cooperatives. There are buying clubs. There are cooperative housing and co-housing. There are community land trust. There are cooperative sharing platforms. We're on one right now. Yet more, there are ways to finance these things. Credit unions, public banking, peer lending, crowdfunding. There are governance structures, how to begin the process of governing all of that. Things like participatory budgeting, the use of community management. There are the public sectors and community wealth building projects. The point is really underscoring Emily's point. Shane, these imaginal cells, there are millions of those happening all across the country now, and they are not yet connected into the butterfly. It is emergent, however. And one of the things that I'm excited about, and by the time y'all are watching this, you won't be able to get to Atlanta unless you already live there. But Shane, Emily, and I, and several hundred other people will be together in deep relationship building at something that we call Resist and Build, to continue to think about how do we resist the harm, the abuse, the horrors that are being visited upon our communities. And I want to specifically name transgendered people, undocumented people, people of color, women. Like, this Trump administration is particularly horrific in what is actually happening now. So we have to fight back. We have to resist that. And we have to build the alternative at the same time. And to me, Emily, I want to invite you to talk about a little bit about the how we are trying to merge both resist and build together, moving towards that butterfly of a post-capitalist economy.
Yeah. Part of the reason that we started up this resist and build process in 2020 was exactly to lift up this framework, this very important framework of resist and build, right? You'll hear different ways, oppose and propose, resist and build and fight. There are other ones that are escaping my mind, but
block and build.
It's definitely, yeah. What's that?
Block and build. We want to,
Block
there's a lot
build.
of ways to talk about this.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch. And to me, it feels like it's in the air. I would argue that the progressive left social movements have been way overrepresented on the resist end, which is really, really important and really vital and just critical, right? Absolutely. But has very much resisted and in fact sometimes been very suspicious of the build end. And I understand why. because to engage in the build, to actually construct on the ground practices that can stay in operation, right? There are all kinds of challenges to that. It's a whole different dynamic than riling up people and organizing a protest or lobbying, or it's just a different process. And it does mean that the build part does involve getting your hands dirty and sometimes making compromises and working with people that might, when you're in resist mode, be your enemy, right? And so there is the danger. There is a real danger of the build work being very much co-opted. And I think partly being informed by the bigger picture and the values of solidarity economy, and also being connected to the resist movements, helps to keep us honest, right? So our build efforts aren't just subsumed within a capitalist logic. But for too long, these different sides of power building have been sundered. And it's really important that we bring them together. The resist, without a sense of where they're heading, it's very likely it just ends up at reforming things, because you're fighting against some oppressive policy of capitalism, and you're making it a little bit better. You get your win, you're making it a little bit better, but you still have capitalism, right? So knowing where you're going really informs what you're fighting for in the resist end of things, and what we would call transformative reform. That you're not just taking this piecemeal baby step process of one win after another, but the system stays intact. On the flip side, solidarity economy, without being connected to the struggles that are going on against various forms of resistance, runs the danger of being co-opted, of becoming inwardly looking, like I'm trying to just keep my business, my co-op business afloat, or my community land trust afloat, isolated, self-interested within that entity. And that's a danger as well. So connecting this up has always been a real central theme of this process that we've been engaged in for going on 5 years now.
And Shane, again, back to your what I thought was an astute question and challenge, really, is like, so what is the transitional plan or the program? For me, the way I think about it is, we are taught in this society that, if you want to make policy change, you vote, and then you lobby elected officials in order to do something. And what I've come to realize is, what Emily is describing, what has inspired me and what I've now dedicated my life to, see, government can't do this for us, right? Like, we have to do it ourselves. Now, I want to be clear. Government also can't stop us from doing this. I mean, unless they lock us up or kill us, which sometimes some particularly repressive governments do. Let's be honest about that. But the point is, this is not actually about government per se. Having said that, government can absolutely facilitate it and make it easier. So there are some governmental policies and politics that can actually make this easier. Government can encourage worker-owned cooperative businesses. Government can write laws that make community land trust and limited equity housing cooperatives easier to achieve. Government can create public banking and use participatory budgeting processes and engage community governance in all kinds of ways. Government can, in fact, and some governments do begin to make it a little easier. Some governments make it very hard, right? And try to repress it. My point is this. I believe that it is possible to take those individual worker co-ops, those individual community land trusts, and engage our work on building alternatives, resist the harms whenever they come up, and do a level of advocacy work and electoral political work, culture shifting transitional work what, again, some people call the transitional program. I think that's what we're about right now. I think we're about building a transitional program, because I like to tell people all the time, yes, I am a co-op incubator, but remember, a worker-owned cooperative business, the noun is business. The worker co-op is the adjective part of it, right? If you don't have a successful business, you can't have a successful worker-owned cooperative business. The business has to still survive. Emily, you and I know we got to still make payroll. We got to still produce some good and service that people will engage. And what's interesting is we don't call it you have to make a profit in the co-op world, do we? We call it surplus. And I'm wondering if you, because to me, that's a very, it seems on first blush, well, oh, it's just the same, but it's not really. There's a different logic behind thinking about surplus versus profit and who owns it. I'm wondering if you can say a word or two about that.
Well, here, David, I, I hate to do this, but I know there is technically a difference. So, for example, if you have worker owners and then you have some workers, say they're on track to become a worker owner, but they're not yet. The profit is the share that the non-worker owner is credited with, right? The surplus is what the worker owners get to split or have control over, right? So yes, there's this difference there. But in terms of what it actually is, I actually this is just me. I don't quite see the point of making a distinction, because either way, it is it is over and above what people are compensated for, right? The value of what is being produced is not, that total value is not being paid either to pay for the inputs, energy, etc., or wages, right? There's some surplus left over. Now, the beautiful thing in a worker co-op is it's the worker owners that get to decide what happens to that surplus.
And that's the point.
I don't make a big distinction between profit versus surplus. I know there are cooperators who are pretty, they're sticklers about that. I just, yeah.
And again, so I don't want to get stuck up on the quibble around which word is the right one to use. What I want to lift up, which you just did, to be very explicit, y'all, in a worker-owned cooperative, the thing that you would normally think of as profit, that is the amount of money that is left over after you've paid all the fixed cost, after you've paid for the labor. Because remember that if a worker-owned cooperative, the labor is by the workers themselves who actually own the joint, right? The point is that it is the workers who get to make the decision, not a shareholder, about how to distribute that. Do they just pay themselves more? Do they invest in more inventory? Do they invest in more tools? Do they invest in more land? The point is, it empowers the worker, but also requires a responsibility on the part of the worker to think like an owner, right? And I can't stress that enough. The fact it's not just a Pollyannish kind of thing, because guess what's going to happen in a worker-owned cooperative business? Disputes are going to happen in a worker-owned cooperative business, and they're going to have to be resolved. And what, to me, the beauty of it is the structure, the logic of a worker-owned cooperative business says we're all in it together, y'all. We all have to make this thing work. And it develops a different kind of muscle. And instead of just thinking about my own individual time for me to clock out, I'm out, see ya, there is an expectation that I owe it to Emily and Shane as not just my co-workers, but my co-owners, that we have to do something. So to me, I agree. The difference between whether you call it a profit or a surplus, the name is not important. What's important is that it both empowers, but also puts a level of responsibility on some decision making that we're just not accustomed to in a typical business. That's the point that I was really trying to make.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
So look at here. We're coming to the end of the hour. I do want to remind folks that here on Democracy or at Redneck Gone Green, we are a program on democracy at work. And the Friends of Democracy at Work are growing. So Shane, I'm going to give you this opportunity to tell folks a little bit about what the Friends of Democracy at Work program is all about.
Yeah, the Friends of Democracy at Work program. We have a platform, Democracy at Work, right? We have over 500,000 YouTube subscribers. We have a specific way of being able to reach a broader audience. And one of the things that we felt very well positioned to do was to essentially offer that platform to various organizations, like-minded organizations that are focused on worker co-ops specifically, but anything in the solidarity economy, to share what they are engaged with doing, whether it's putting on a conference, whether it's, being or engaging in community land trusts or any of those efforts that are under the umbrella of the Solidarity Economy Network, giving them access to a broader audience. I view this as an opportunity to help educate people because that's a big piece of this. I know a bunch of people that can't spell the word solidarity and don't know what economy means. But the goal that we're trying to reach by opening up our platform to all these various organizations is to reach more people and to educate them as to the different ways in which people are coming together and are building pieces of infrastructure that are going to be very important for us moving forward. And giving people the opportunity to have or to participate in a growing vision for what the world can be after capitalism, because it's coming. And I think one of my goals specifically at the Resist and Build conference is to bring more people together and to facilitate being able to get their message out as best we can to the broadest audience that we can. And that's one of the reasons that I'm excited about the weekend, but also the program Friends of Democracy at Work.
Thank you so much, Shane. And Emily, I want to give you an opportunity for any final thoughts or closing remarks that you want to share.
Yeah, so this is a complete tangent, but when you said that some people can't spell solidarity, I remember being in a classroom. I was a guest in somebody's classroom, and the question to the students was, what is solidarity? And somebody said, it means being alone. So they were thinking solitary.
Yeah.
So just solidarity, solitary is opposite, really, but so interesting. Anyway, so random, just amusing thought to me. I don't have anything more profound to say than that.
Well, thank you so much, Emily, for coming on and being part of our experiment of a pre-record. A reminder, folks, we want to thank you for being a member of the growing Redneck Gone Green community. I want to remind you that this program exists in order to come to terms with the reality of a collapsing polycentric crisis and a reminder that there is something that can be done. We can build a new world together, but we have to do it together. This cannot be done alone. We here at Redneck Gone Green embrace the idea that we are preppers, but unlike most of the preppers who are hoarding guns and food and getting ready to go to war against everybody else, we are preparing our community and ourselves for a new world in which we are able to live in peace, in justice, in balance together. Keep on keeping on, y'all. Peace.
Thank you. Bye.